John Bolton has authored what I'm going to call a tell-all book, and John joins us now. John, welcome back. You were a frequent guest on this program.
Glad to be back with you.
For many years you were on the show. When you came on the show in years past, you would often bash the left and you would bash the media. Now it seems like with this tell-all book, you're calling the president a danger to the republic. Seems like you're trying to get Joe Biden elected.
No, I'm not happy about that either. Look, the clip you just ran from the president demonstrates what the problem is. Those remarks were childish and unbecoming a president. I'm really not going to respond to them. And I can tell you, I haven't become a squishy liberal Democrat. Really, the purpose of the book is to describe to people what I saw, what happened during my time at the White House, and they'll make up their own minds.
Well, look, in the future, does the president have access to free to viewpoints and information, which any president needs? If in the future he sits down with an aide and knows that that aide may just walk out of there and a couple of months later publish a book that tells all about that conversation. What you've done is to restrict the president's access in the future to information and viewpoint.
I don't think so at all. You know, during the years I was there and before that, there were plenty of leaks out of the White House already. I didn't do it. I think that almost every subject I address in the book, the president himself spoke about publicly. And unfortunately, all too often, he didn't tell the truth. Look, people are adults in Washington. They know that what they say is going to be transmitted to a lot of people. And I viewed my loyalty not to an individual, but to the country and to a philosophy about how to make America secure. I think there's no better time for the people to know about the character of the president than during a presidential election campaign.
Well, are you trying to save America from this president? It sounds like it.
I'm trying to give people the facts. I'm not going to vote for him. I did vote for him in 2016. I looked at the alternatives and concluded that it was worth voting for him, considering the alternative being Hillary Clinton. But after 17 months of serving in the White House, I cannot, in good conscience, do that again.
It seemed to me, as after you joined the administration, that you had a real problem with Venezuela. I think things seemed to start going south with Venezuela. I remember you appearing on camera, it was on this program, I wasn't interviewing you, but you were making a statement. You had really talked about the Venezuelan generals about to take over and get rid of Maduro. It was as if you were in league with the CIA or somebody trying to get Maduro out and use the generals to do it. But it fell apart. Maduro is still there. Was that the start of the trouble?
Yeah. No, look, the president waffled on the question of Venezuela. I lay that out in the book, but I don't have any regrets about supporting the Venezuelan opposition. They were the ones dealing with people in the Maduro regime. It was all very well known in Venezuela. In late April of 2019, they came very, very close to overthrowing Maduro. It's a tragedy for the people there that they weren't able to do it. But the opposition continues, and I still believe one day Venezuela will be free. It's important for the United States, not only for that to happen, but to push out the Cubans, the Russians, the Chinese, and others whose presence in Venezuela props up the Maduro regime and threatens us in this hemisphere.
Well, the president says you want to bomb everybody. Did you want to bomb the Venezuelans? No, I'm not joking. I'm not joking here. I mean, the president said very clearly there, bombs away with John Bolton. I mean, that's pretty strong stuff. Did you want to bomb any foreign country?
No. Look, the president is acting as he often does. I'm really not going to respond to it. These are serious issues that ought to be treated seriously.
Well, John, I think you should. Look, if this is a tell-all book, you're telling everything that went on between you and the president in your 17 months in the White House. But now you won't make any comment when the president comes back at you. I think you should.
I don't think I should. I think when you make those kinds of comments, it degrades the office of the presidency. And I think people can draw their own conclusions from it. I'm not going to get into a situation where I'm engaged in in exchanging petty insults with him or anybody else, frankly.
Okay. The other criticism is that you rushed publication so that you get the book out there before the election, because that would affect the election. You did rush into it, didn't you?
Well, I didn't rush into it. I went through a pre-publication review process that lasted a pretty arduous 4 months, and at the end of which, as even the government concedes, the person in the NSC staff responsible for the review concluded there was no classified information in the book. I do think the timing means people have it open to them to consider for November, but it has one other purpose, Stuart. When a lot of the people on the scene today are gone in 50 years, the book will still be there.
Last one. You're also accused of just wanting to make a lot of money. You are going to make a lot of money. Oh, you are. You are. This is going to be a bestseller. You're going to make a lot of money. You're going to make $5 million?
Look, I don't know. If I had wanted to make a lot of money, I never would have gone into the government. I served in the Reagan administration in 2 different jobs, 2 different departments. I served in the Bush 41 administration, I served in the Bush 43 administration, and I served in the Trump administration. If making money were my only objective, I wouldn't have done any of those.
Okay. Look, thanks very much for being on the show today, John. We do appreciate it. And when I get my free copy, I'll read the book. John Bolton, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.